It was the 21st of March 2020, Joe's 24th birthday, and I was invited for the celebration. But that morning, I received news that he had jumped off the 10th floor of his apartment building. It was so unforeseen because Joe was a very jolly fellow who always had a smile in spite of having lost his job in the airlines because of the pandemic. It was later that I found out Joe was suffering from smiling depression, a type of mental health disorder. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to point out the actual weight of mental health disorders and inspire you to make a difference. Mental health problems are often disregarded as problems that are all in your head. Well, yes, where else could it be? However, it is much more fatal than it seems. Estimations by the World Bank is that 10% of the global population suffer from some sort of mental disorder. That's 3 in 10 Malaysians, 51.5 million Americans, and over 1 billion worldwide. And isn't it just heartbreaking to know that 8 million people die from mental illness every single year? And what's equally sad is the stigmatization around this issue has caused the ones who are already suffering to hide behind a smile. William Shakespeare in the play Macbeth said, and I quote, "There's no art to find a mind's construction in the face," unquote. Truly, more often than not, the facade of happiness is the mask to hide their pain, while they suffer in silence. Dangerous, incompetent, unreliable. These are the commonly used words to describe the victims of mental health problems. So would you speak up? Knowing that society has already labeled you to such disgrace. Recently, Morgan Urso, a 15-year-old American girl who loves hockey and has been playing it since she was 4. So when she was going through a tough time receiving treatment for her severe depression, she decided to seek support from her coach. What could go wrong, right? She was kicked off the team the very next morning. Morgan was one of the already few people who decided to speak out on her mental health condition, and yet she was immediately silenced. And this is the heartbreaking reality for the victims of mental health problems. But we have the power to rectify the situation, and that power is within our voices. We can start by forming small groups. For example, after Joe's death, his unemployed friends got together to discuss their own mental struggles and found ways to escape it. Eventually, many of them started small-scale businesses, selling traditional Malaysian street food. Engaging with one another has helped them recover and facilitate their own mental health recovery. Like what Morgan Harper Nicholas, an American Christian singer-songwriter, once said, "Tell the story of the mountains you've climbed. Your words could be a page in someone else's survival guide." Not only that, creating an environment where these vulnerable groups can engage honestly and comfortably is pivotal, as it empowers them to have more autonomy over their mental health condition. For example, in Malaysia, we have this emotional support hotline called Befrienders Malaysia, where people suffering from mental health disorders can call them anytime to have unashamed conversations without the fear of being judged. And this can be done on a more global scale through podcasts, webinars, and even talk shows. By doing so, we are creating a platform where people with mental health struggles can engage honestly and comfortably without the fear of being judged, without the fear of being called out by the society, without the fear of being shamed. With that being said, I'm convinced that we have it in us to amplify the diminished whispers screaming for help, hidden behind a smile. So today I thank you for listening to my voice. But now it's time to lend the world your voice, because the best route to change engages all of our voices. Thank you.
Thank you, Pavit, very much indeed. So I'm going to ask you the first question. And I agree that we all need to speak out, and we all need to be supportive of people who have mental health problems. What do you think governments should do, or corporations should do, to make the fact that if you speak out, you are not punished by being sidelined, or, as you say, thrown off the team?
All right. Thank you so much for the question. Firstly, let's talk about the government. The first and foremost thing that the government should do is to decriminalize mental health problems by decriminalizing suicide. In Malaysia specifically, Section 309 of the Malaysian Penal Code states, whoever commits suicide will be immediately imprisoned. Now, is that what we really want? Suicide criminalization is available in Brunei, Pakistan, Bahamas, but as well as Malaysia. And this is not the way that we should encourage our nation to progress. The United Nations has included the mental health plans in the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, how are we to achieve these goals if these people are imprisoned? For example, there are 264 million people suffering from depression currently. Now, just a mere 10% of them decided to commit suicide. And thank God they are stopped. But now they are being imprisoned. That is 26.4 million people not being able to be productive members of the society. So instead of imprisonment, I suggest rehabilitation. The government should incorporate and implement more rehabilitation programs and centers for people who are depressed or people suffering from mental health problems generally, so that they can recover in the nick of time. The very basis of mental health well-being, defined by the World Health Organization, is to able to be cope with the normal stresses of life and be productive members of the society. Imprisoning the victims will disable them to be contributory entities in our nation. Hence, the first thing the government should do is to decriminalize suicide. Secondly, I believe what corporations should do is to provide funding for these rehabilitation centers. We cannot keep expecting the government to provide funding, because the government has to get the money from somewhere, right? And if they keep borrowing from international banks, it will take a toll on the country in the long run, as the interest rate is high. Hence, international corporations or national corporations in general should provide the funding so that these rehabilitation programs is effective and progressive, so that our nation and the entire world can progress inclusively, effectively, and compassionately. Thank you.
Thank you for an excellent answer to my question. We have time for one more question, and that's going to be from my colleague, Gavin.
Thank you. Pavit, I think in a lot of parts of the world over the last 10 or 20 years, we've seen progress in this field, while there is still a long way to go. Do you feel that this is something that, as generations change and become more understanding, we will inevitably see progress in? Or are there barriers and concerns that might hold us back anyway?
Right. Thank you so much for the question. It's a really good question. True, it has been progressive in the mental health arena. However, the psychiatrists in our nation is still very little. For example, in the Southeast Asian region, there are 0.38 psychiatrists per 100,000 population. In the Western Pacific region, there's 0.27 psychiatrists per 100,000 population. But the World Health Organization stated in 1996 that the average amount of psychiatrists per 100,000 population should be at least one. Imagine going to a doctor with a broken arm, and the only thing you see is the doctor's head. The rest of the body is from other people. Unthinkable, right? But this is the case for the victims of mental health problems. So there are barriers. And the very first barrier, I think, is the lack of awareness on mental health problems. In most education curriculums, mental health is not included as it is deemed as unnecessary. Why would you want to learn about mental health when you can learn about your physical health? It's already complex enough. However, people fail to realize that mental health affects the physical health. So the first thing is to raise awareness, and we can do so by the implementing education into our society. In other words, exposure by education. By doing so, people learn more about mental health and how to cope with it, and it also provokes empathy for the people who are suffering. With that being said, I strongly believe education by exposure to overcome the obstacle of the lack of awareness is crucial. Thank you.